Hey everyone, here we are again back in the Woodworking Wisdom Workshops. My name's Colwin Way, and today we're going to do, I'm really quite excited, as you can probably tell, because I'm going to do one of my my favorite things, and we're going to turn a lovely piece of rippled ash and put a little bit of color on it. Now, Callum was talking about this yesterday. If you were watching live, he was looking at doing his own ash bowl and enhancing the grain with some color as well. So we're going to look at some stills in a moment, but we've got this piece to do. I have spoken about cutting a piece of an ash tree down there not so long ago in the winter. This is one of the cores from one of the bowls that I've done, and you can see how much rippling and figure there is on there, and that's really going to bounce some color around. Ash on its own, if I just sanded and finished, it would be beautiful, and it would shimmer and give a real chatoyance, but once you add color, it really shows it off. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm just going to make note of, or just give someone a bit of a shout out, really, because we've just had a video sent in by Maria from Wales, and she sent in a video of one of her weebles weebling a punk weeble. So that's going to be up on the website very soon, and it's going to be a project that we're going to do in 2 weeks time, so stay tuned for that one. That's going to be an interesting one. But like I said yesterday, this is my guilty pleasure today. I'm doing something that I really am looking forward to. So let's have a look at a couple of those stills. We've got Craig, by the way, on cameras and questions. You know what to do. Ask the questions and he will relay them to me. So let's have a look at one of those orange pots. Or this is we'll start with this one. This is what we're doing today, actually. So I mentioned yesterday, if you were watching live, that we're going to do some coloring on a rippled piece of ash. That's sycamore in the picture there. However, it does the same thing. Look how it enhances the ripples in there. So you've got those wave effects. That comes from the dye picking out the denser areas, or actually going into the softer areas and not being absorbed by the denser areas. Now, I wanted to show the natural grain as well, so I left the inside plain, and that's what we're going to do on today's bowl also. We go to the next stills. This is an example. This is a piece of ash. So Callum, this is the 2 shots of the same bowl. What we're doing here, so this was a base coat of black to start with, believe it or not, sanded right the way off, then the red, sanded back again, and then finished off with yellow and a lacquer. And look what that does. It really picks out the grain in that ash. So it can really work to your favor. We're not covering anything up here. We're enhancing that natural grain that can sometimes, if I'm honest, can sometimes sort of disappear normally. With when you look, unless you look closely. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to play with color. So like I said, one of my guilty pleasures. So let's get started. So this is a rough turn bowl. It's gone to a really weird shape, and it always does. The thing is with rough turning, this was probably about a year, 15 months ago that I turned this, soaking wet because it was a standing tree, but it's now dry, bone dry and ready to go. So it's dried really quickly for me. Normally that would have been about 3 years to dry if that was left in the solid board, and it probably would have split quite badly as well. So rough turning is definitely the way to go for us. Also, wet timber is much cheaper than dry timber as well. No one's had to convert it and dry it and store it and all those sorts of things. So this is definitely a good way to go. So I'm going to start off, and I've always put obviously a foot, so when it's dried I can rehold it. However, I want to start like that. I want to reshape the outside of the bowl before I go to the inside. Okay, so what we'll do, I'm going to hold that foot first, which has gone slightly oval, but that's fine. The jaws will hold it, and I'm using C jaws here. So we're going to hold between those jaws, make sure I've got a decent grip. I'm not worried about the bowl being concentric at the moment because it's far from it. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a little recess here that I can expand the chuck into. There's many jaws that we can use for this job. Depending on the size of the bowl will depend on the size of jaws that you're going to use. Because I'm only holding the bowl on the inside just to skim this outside form, I'm just going to use the very outside of the C jaws. Outside edge, no dovetail, just a parallel internal curve. So I think I'm just going to move, just for the moment, move my tool rest, my tailstock out the way, and then we're just going to do a little parallel recess, 114 mil. 114 mil because I've got the SK114 on the lathe. So the perfect circle of that chuck is 114. The perfect circle of the jaws, the outside of the jaw, is 114. That's what we're going to measure. That's what we're going to cut. It's going to be a really, really secure hold for the job I'm doing. So I've already set up a set of calipers. Okay, so we're just going to roughly scribe where that 114 is. There we are. Nothing, absolutely nothing tricky going on here. We're going to do a parallel recess. That's deep enough. At the moment, it's not parallel. I'm just going to straighten up. We can use a flat scraper, or you can use a skew. Just check to make sure I've got enough there. That will be ample. Yeah, first question there. Yes, Craig.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So good to have you with us once again. A real international audience once again, Colwin. So a great question from Keith. How do you tell the difference between rippled ash and normal ash?
Rippled ash. So ripples, you'll see them as go back to the blue bowl in a second, Craig. Now this is, so those lines running down through the bowl on the blue side, they're almost like pinches in skin. They're ripples. You'll see them on ash as quite striking. I haven't got a picture of that, unfortunately, but they're quite striking lines. Quilting, that picture that you're looking at now, the lines that you've got on there, that's a crotch section. So the intersection between two branches right in the middle, you can see it sort of funneling up to the top of the bowl. That's the crotch. Now they are little ripples. If you think about ripples in sand, that sort of thing, that's what we're looking for. And what you get with that is a shimmer. Okay, a shimmer when you move it in the light, that's rippling. Okay, we go back to the bowl that we're working on here. I'll just show you a little bit of the, so here, these are the ripples, these lines going up and down. And sometimes they can be hidden quite well until you actually sand and put a polish on. But those are our ripples. You'll see them sometimes. So here's a story. If you have the surveyor that works for veneer companies, when they look for rippled timbers, they'll go out and they'll take a little punch, a square punch, and punch a square section of the bark and then lift that bark out. And if they can see underneath that the little rippled section of timber, they know that tree's rippled through, and that's a very valuable tree for veneering, because obviously a veneer, you make a lot of veneer out of one tree, for instance. So that's what we're looking for, that little area that's going to show that real chatoyance, they call it, and I learned that from Jimmy Clues in one of his demonstrations. There we are. So that's rippling. We're going to show you rippling when we finish this, because it's going to really boom out of this one. So all we're doing, look, there's my recess. I'm going to hold here. Okay, very seldom used, but it will work on this piece. Make sure it's fully on, and I can expand it on. I've got full surface contact on there because I've gone to 114. I've gone to that 114 mil. Now I can shape the outside of the bowl. We're going to sand, then we're going to start playing with the color. So we're going to create a sacrificial foot. So that just means that foot's going to be taken off at the end. You've seen me do it endless amount of times. We're going to clean everything up first. Put a little hole just here because I'm using the tailstock to hold between the centers when we do take that foot away. Yes, Craig, another question.
Yeah, just a quick question. What size of blank or bowl was that started off at?
So let's get a measure on it. It looks to be around about 8 inches. So we are looking at, yeah, about 7.5 to 8 inches, that one. We'll do another measurement when we finish. But there we are. Nice and secure. Lathe speed to 0. Turn the lathe on. And then we can get things moving. Look where I am with the tool rest. We're just below center. I'm going to use a 3/8 bowl gouge we have, or I have sharpened this one before I started today. Just going to clean up the underside, make that little hole. Well, not even a hole really, just a little mark. Remember, this is just a foot to be removed afterwards. There we are. Now let's just drag back away from that foot. And now I'm going to do a finishing cut. So get rid of that unevenness. And I'm using the bevel, the back of the tool. I'm pushing up the length of the chisel. And that creates a nice slide. So the bevel's rubbing all the while. And that's going to give us a really nice finish. Now I need to do another cut. I never quite got the solid timber there. So we'll do the same thing. So pushing up the length of the tool. Thing not to do here would be to pull with your leading hand. So this hand mustn't pull. If you pull, you actually pull the bevel away from the work. So this hand is just to support. And the pressure is coming from your hand that's on the handle. I say that because it will obviously makes a difference whether you're left or right-handed. There we are. So let's have a look at the finish. You should hopefully start to see some of those ripples start to ping out now. There we are. You can see these are beautiful. These are the ripples. This is what I'm talking about. Really, really pretty bit of timber, that one. This is really going to lend itself to the color. I'm going to put a little base down. So let's just put a little flat area in. Let's go with my skew. There we are. And I'm going to come up to that area with a little lip. Do that with the bowl gouge. Colwin. Just making sure the line is a constant one. There we are. So you can just see maybe I've just put a little flick on the end just here. That's where the base is going to start. I just wanted to change the line a little bit. Yes, Craig, question?
Yeah, we've got a really good, some great questions coming in today, guys. So, yep, keep them coming. Question from Paul. Colwin, do you use a moisture meter to know when your rough balls are ready to turn? And also, what percentage moisture you're aiming for?
If I'm honest with you, the percentage of moisture, I want to say it's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. It's relevant to the type of bowl that I want to make. So say, for instance, I'm making a bowl for fruit, for salad, that sort of thing. If there's a little bit of moisture left in that, I don't care, because it can move a bit. That's fine. It's all part of the charm of that piece. If we're doing something that has to be measured, specific, architectural, that sort of thing, then the moisture is important. And you're around about 12% is the magic number, really. Too dry, so sort of kiln dried materials down to 10%, you start to get quite hard and dusty. Start to get 15, 18%, they're quite damp and they're going to move a little bit more. No, I don't use a moisture meter because for me, it's not important enough to worry about, because most of my work is this type of thing. I'm not into architectural stuff as much anymore, so I don't need to worry about that moisture content. I was just going to start talking about exotics. Exotics for me mean very dense imported timbers to the UK. So what I mean there is some of the African timbers, South American timbers, the ones that are very slow growing, that are very, very dense. then you have to be a little bit more careful about moisture in those, because they take a long time to dry. And what happens with them is they'll tend to crack and craze on end grain if they're not dry enough before you bring them indoors. So that's, especially centrally heated houses, it's a killer for very dense timbers. But this sort of thing, no, I don't worry about it. And it's very much an experience thing. I'll physically lift it up and feel the weight of it. And the first cut that you make, you'll also feel, are those shavings down? There's a little bit of moisture in them. So then put it back again. So yeah, that's what I do.
Frederick's asked, how do you dry your bowl blanks? Do you seal them in wax? Do you wrap them in film?
So rough turned, and then I just tend to leave them because I'm in the southwest of the UK. I don't have to worry massively about massive changes, fluctuations, or rapid fluctuations in temperature. If you rough turn toward, again, in the UK I'm talking about now, the autumn time, so as we go into winter, so the cooler months, you've got the winter for it to dry, rather than rough turning wet and then giving them the shock of the summer heat, then that would cause problems. But so I tend to do them then. If I was worried about, let's say for instance I was doing fruit timbers or timbers that are known for large movement, eucalyptus, that sort of stuff, then absolutely still seal the end grain. You can do that with things like end seal with PVA, old paint, that sort of stuff, wax. But most of mine just get left. They get left in the workshop. It's a stone workshop, down nice and low, out of the direct sunlight, and occasionally turned over. If you're going to wrap them in anything, be careful, because you will, if it's completely wrapped and cling wrapped, for instance, then you're going to stop the drying process. You can actually encourage mold as well. If you want to spalt things, then absolutely tomato, a bit of yogurt, a bit of tomato feed, and then wrap it up in cling wrap. Let that fungus start to build, and that works really, really well. So it needs air. It needs some sort of air circulation to get the drying process done, but not too much heat and not too much wind or anything like that. All right, for the minute. Grand. Right. I'm not going to do any sanding on that. We're going to go straight with color, because once we put the color on, then I'm going to need to sand. Now, I'm also not going to introduce any heat. I would normally put a bit of heat on this, take it outside, a little bit of a flame maybe, just to burn off the alcohol from the dye. Obviously not going to do that in here. It's a lovely workshop with lots of fire alarms that would go off. A hair dryer might work, but craft dryers are good. Just a little craft dryer just to help that alcohol dissipate. We're going to just give it a little bit of time, that's all. So I'm going to go on with black. This looks completely wrong, but a bit of black, and I'm brushing it on, not putting it on with a spray. I'm brushing it on. I want it to really, really soak in. Now, the reason that I haven't sanded either is at the moment, all the pores are open. They're absorbing the dye. We're going to sand once this is on, and we're going to do our normal sanding. So from a coarse one, I say normal sanding, I'm going to use a power sander just for a bit of speed. But look, this is all we're doing. Pop it on, get it to soak in properly, and then let it dry. Put that somewhere that I'm not going to knock it over, he says. All right, so look, that's been absorbed already. What you'll find, if you sand this, say for instance you sand a 400, it's very difficult for that dye then to penetrate into it. Some pores are open and it's ready to accept that color. Now I'm waffling a little bit because I'm waiting for that dye to dry. It is an alcohol, it's a spirit stain, so it will dry fairly quickly. But it's like a kettle. If you're watching it, it takes a lot longer. And we say about sanding sealers and oils and all those sorts of things. Don't turn the lathe on too quickly because you're going to get covered in finish. Well, I don't want to get covered in black stain. But more importantly, what will happen in a minute when I start sanding it, it'll clog the abrasive up. So that's why I just want it to dry a little bit more. So we're going to introduce some heat with our sanding as well in a minute. And really enjoy your colouring, because it's a little bit... Every bowl you make is absolutely unique, different than the last, because the grain is always... It's like a fingerprint. The grain is always unique to that piece of timber. Now, question just before we start sanding. Yep.
A couple of questions. Callum's asked, do you use a rough brush to raise the grain before any staining?
No, I haven't, because I've just gone straight on from the final cut of the bowl gouge, so I haven't needed to. Those pores are wide open. They're ready to take the grain in.
Okay, and I think we've had a couple of people that lost connectivity there for a second, or lost our stream. And other people, if you're reading the comments here, just refresh your stream and you should be good to go. We're still live here, so still with you, all good. There was another question. What do you use to clean your brushes after spirit stains?
Don't. So I let them dry, and then when you reuse them, just break them open and again, and you're good to go. I've got a different color brush for each stain, but just let it dry out. We've actually got a cabinet just behind the cameras there full of stain with the brush, just with a bit of cling wrap around it, holding the brush to the tin. So that's your brush you use for that one each time. So yeah, don't bother. It's a bit messy cleaning everything out. One thing I want to mention, now I've primed the lads to give you the links for this. I'm not using my rotary sander head for this. So there, rotary sander, we've used these lots of times. Look, the good thing, the bad thing with them, they're quite soft. So in my normal sanding, brilliant. But I want something quite hard now to sand with. So I'm going to use the FlexiPad one. So the actual power sanding pads, a little bit firmer. Okay, so I primed the guys up. They've got the links for these. Now these are available in three sizes. You've got the 1 inch, the 2 inch, and the 3 inch. But also in the 2 inch, you get a tapered version, or you get the 90-degree version. So I wanted to highlight those for you because I know that someone will ask in a minute, because they look different from the one that I've normally used. But it's a bit harder. Great for this compared to my normal sanding, which is a softer version of the power sanding pad. Okay, so with all that being said, let's sand that off. That's given that a nice lot of time now to dry, which was my aim. We're going to put dust extraction on. We're going to sand all that back. Just going to refresh my grips. And we're using a 120 to start us off with here. Have a look and see what we've got. Well, I don't want there are any lines, so we're going to get rid of some of these lines in a minute. But look what's happening. Can you see how it's picking out the harder spots? There we are. I'm going to get up into there with some hand sanding in a minute. That's not quite getting right into that corner, so just in there. There we are, that's getting it. And then we're going to go to a slightly finer rotary sander as well. Right, let's see what we've got. So I still see a little line there. I want to get rid of that. I want to get back to just this grain. Yes, Craig.
Yes, we've got a few questions backed up, my friend. What grade of paper did you start with?
Let's just turn that off a minute. Sorry, mate. Sorry.
Deafened by the extractor. So, what grade of paper did you start with?
So it's a 120. 120 on there. I'm going to go back to 120 in a minute. I just want to get rid of. You can see that line there. That's running all the way around, so that's got to disappear. But what we're doing is highlighting these areas here and just bring that around. You can see how it's made that darker now. That's what I'm trying to do. And the black is only that base. It does the highlighting. Then the main color, which is going to be my blue, my turquoise blue, that's going to then gonna be the base color sort of thing. Yes, Craig.
Nigel said, is it best to use an old or cheap drill to sand with? He's heard that it does wear the drills out fairly quickly.
Yeah, it does. My choice of drill here wouldn't be my first choice. So at home, I use, I want to say a cheap drill. I use a hobby Bosch drill. So about 50 quid. A normal mains powered drill because they're a bit faster than a cordless one. So that's just the workshop drill. That's why I'm using that one. But a corded regular drill, no hammer action, just normal twist drill is the best one to go for. And yeah, just go for one of the cheapies. Don't spend a lot of money on it. This is the speed that we're looking for, really. All right. Okay, right. We're just going to finish this sanding and get that blue on, and then we can turn this over. There we are. Let's see if we're there. Still like to take, we're at fine up here. Just want to take a little bit more of that colouring down the bottom away. Now, I'm not worried about a dark patch down there if it is just a dark patch. If it's a line that I can see, that's an issue because that will be very apparent when the piece is finished. So I just want to work on that to get rid of the line. It's just because the power sander can't get into that tight curve, but this one will. That's working nicely. There we are. So now we go with 240 on the power sander. There we are. Right. Now we can think about the blue. So we're going for this really, really nice, vivid blue. And we'll do the same thing. Don't need too much. Goes a long way. Same thing. On with the brush. You can see that just being eaten up by that timber. But look what that's done. So without that black going on first, we wouldn't have had these really deep marks of the grain here. That blue wouldn't have picked that up as much. So it's really sort of enhanced that grain nicely. I'm sort of wittering on again because I want that dye to dry. So some timely questions are coming. Yes, Craig.
Jimby's suggested perhaps if the lathe was put in reverse, it would be easier, maybe for the sanding.
Easier? I'm not sure. Normally we would reverse if you're heavy sanding and you wanted to take the nap away, but this is going in so many different directions. Then I'm hand sanding, all those sorts of things. So I just don't need to reverse the lathe. I get where you're coming from, and that's what reverse function is there, is for reverse sanding. But on this, it's so smooth already. I've not really made an effort to do that sort of thing. I've used the drill to sort it out. But yeah, absolutely, if you want to reverse it, do it. Absolutely. That's already dry, I think. We're going to crack straight on. I say it's already dry. Look at my hand. It's covered in blue. Turn the lathe on. Slowly. I'll get a clean bit of tissue just to wipe that surface. And I'm not going to sand as heavy now. All I want to do is denib. Take a little bit back. So I want to go 240. You've got options after this. You can wax this bowl, or you can lacquer it. We're going to talk about that in 2 seconds. Let me just do a little bit more sanding. See what we've got. Yeah, we'll go a little bit further. I want to get some of that white coming back through again. Just starting to see it here, especially on those really dense spots. Look. I'm going to leave it there. We've got just the right amount coming through. Okay, now because time restraints, I would say let's go and lacquer it. And lacquering's great, but the trouble with lacquer, okay, this is an acrylic lacquer, the CHESTNUT one, we've got to wait for it to dry, and I haven't got time to wait for it to dry. You certainly don't want to watch lacquer dry for the next half an hour. So we're going to put a wax on there instead. I just wipe that surface. Yes, whilst I'm doing that, we're going to get another question from Craig.
Yeah, we've got a few questions here, Colwin. So the Callum said, have you ever used ebonizing lacquer, then swirl paints on top, and then take the center out? Ebonizing lacquer, swirl paints, then. Yeah,
no, I haven't. I know the paints you're talking about, and I'm trying to think. Joe Sonia's paints, I'm guessing you're talking about. No, I haven't. I have seen them. They're a fantastic effects that you can get. Just look it up, Joe Sonia, and the paint effect you get from that. No, I haven't. I don't think, for me, it's not my thing, as it were. But I do respect it. I like it. But it's not my sort of thing, so I haven't given it a go. I've used ebonizing lacquers all the time. I use loads of ebonizing lacquer.
So Laz has said, excellent tip for putting the black on first to highlight the grain. Loves it.
Not my tip. I learned that from another great turner, Phil Irons. And if you look up his work, you'll see it. It's his tip. I learned from him.
And Thomas has asked, what's the average speed for sanding items?
If you're really hooked up to good extraction, I don't bother taking the speed down at all. You have to have good extraction. You have to make sure that you're protected from the dust, because it does send clouds of dust up into the air. If you're worried about the dust and you're trying to control it, then slow the lathe down, and that will help control the flow.
Sorry.
No,
Maria's asked, how do you get dye off your hands?
Where? Give it about a week and it'll be gone. I'm naughty, really. I should be wearing gloves. But I'll be going home tonight. I'll be coming into work tomorrow. No one really cares whether I've got blue hands or not. Okay, let's just get that buffed up. Just going to buff it with a bit of tissue. Dye is difficult with dye and stains. They're on your hands and that's it. Even using sort of methylated spirits, which is how you dilute the stains, it doesn't really, it's not really that effective. There we are. Let's stop and have a quick look. So already, I reckon another couple of coats of that wax and you'll start getting that real striking appearance. Look at that. See what I mean about how it just really enhances all of those mockings, and the black has really allowed that to jump out as well. Really pretty. We'll shift that in a minute. I like the contrast. So when I'm making a bowl like this, the contrast of the inside is one thing. So that's the nice white inside. But then the base, because I'll always burn a name and the timber on the bottom, and to have a nice white base to be able to do that contrasts with the color of the outside. So I leave that. That's absolutely fine. When we finish that in a second, you'll see what I mean. So look, we've used the seed jaws on the very outer edge to hold that bowl to start with. So all we've got to do now, turn the thing over, hold that fake sacrificial foot, and we can now start thinking about the inside. Nice and quick. Lathe speed to 0, turn the lathe on. That is now 1300 revs. Just going to clean the outside, or not the outside, the rim. Just taking away that sharp edge from that. I don't like sharp edges on bowls because they damage ever so quickly. A little bit of sanding on there as well in a moment. Just stop and check just to see how thick or thin we are. It's a little bit thicker down the bottom of the cut than it is at the top, so we're going to take a little bit more of a cut. Another check. That's better. Again, just have another double check. This is going to have a flat base on it, so I want to make sure that my curve on the inside isn't heading towards that flat base. But that's looking nice. Just a little bit more of a cut down the bottom, and we're there. Yes, great.
Yep, the questions here. Well, Mark has mentioned that alcohol hand wash, the stuff, the sanitizer that we've all been using a lot recently, is really good for getting dye off your hands. So,
brilliant.
Top tip.
There you go.
Yeah,
there we are.
I'll try that. I'm always walking around with red or black hands. And somebody did comment that, you know, do we have to make sure we've got super clean hands, or yourself in particular, when we're doing shots for the catalogue and stuff like that?
Yeah.
It's a yes, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely.
We're always getting moaned at for grubby hands and fingernails and stuff. Because
wedding rings, things like that, they must be off. Yeah. Safety, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, there's always lots of that in there.
A little bit of care when you get to the center nib, otherwise you'll be chasing away a tear forever in that center point. So it's always quite important. Just take your time, rub the bevel throughout the cut, because what you don't want to have is, you know, those turning lines that you get when there's no bevel rubbing. If you have a bevel rubbing, you're not going to get a turning line. That's you'll have a constant finish, a constant surface. There, right, let's start a little bit of sanding. Dust extraction on. We're going to start with a 120 grit. I'm not going to do any color on the inside. Lovely. We're at 180. $240. And then 400. almost ready. I'm going to go over that with a 600 grit hand sand. And then we'll go back with our wax. There we are. Just sand that in. This is web rack, so this is a 1500 grit nylon abrasive. Okay, works really, really well for applying wax. Gives you a lovely, lovely satin finish. Yes, Craig.
And what wax is that, sir?
Yeah, so that is the microcrystalline restoration wax. I naturally just go for either that one or you saw me using this, I think it was last week, going the clear paste wax as well. Either of those two. Microcrystalline just means that it's got a water inhibitor in, so where they say restoration wax, furniture and things like that, where you're going to get heavy traffic, you get a lot of fingerprints potentially. Microcrystalline is a little bit of a resistance to that, where just general wood wax is the wax we've been using for years. Great for this sort of thing. That's great.
We've done a question about the extractor that you're using today, which I can answer the questions. What decibel noise level? It does sound very quiet, but you've got to understand we're using microphones which are kind of loud noise and sound cancelling. But the decibel level on this particular extractor is 77 decibels, and it's the Craft AC118CE. It's a cyclone, so kind of separates the fine dust from the heavy chips. Good extractor, really efficient.
Yeah, before I take that off, let's do that full rotation. That beautiful timber. I'm going to just quickly, if I take it off, just to look at the grain. That's a bit. Go try that over. There we go. Let's get that. That grain is absolutely stunning. Now that looks quite nice on there. You know, you can see the rippling, but when you turn it over, that's when it really pops out. Now, I will work that with a bit of carnauba wax later on to get a shine on there instead of that satiny finish. But it's, you know, really, really pretty bit of timber. What I want to do now is just take the base away, okay, and clean that up. So we're going to reverse it around. You've seen me do this many times. If you've watched any of these videos, you'll know what we're about to do. Push plate. So little faceplate ring on the back. Goes on to the C-jaws here. Expand, get my longer chuck key. Expand the jaws to the inner dovetailed surface of the faceplate ring. Lathe speed to 0. Add the tailstock back again. On the tailstock, we're going to have a live ring center. Ring center because I don't want the tailstock center to dive into the timber too far. Yes, Craig.
Yeah, a couple of questions. A couple of people mentioning possibly a dust extraction video might be quite nice. And possibly that's something that we could do between ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because there's many, it's almost a conversation that we need to have as opposed to a conversation on video sort of thing, because there's many types of extractor for many different jobs. We briefly spoke about cyclone extractors, vacuum extractors, and impeller type extractors, so the bag type, and what you would use one over the other for. Now for turning, I'm always in favor of an extractor that will create lots of volume. Traditionally, they're ones for planar thickness and things like that that need to create a lot of air movement. The air movement, or the speed of the air running through the pipe, means that it's going to drag from further away from the nozzle end. So vacuums are fantastic. Suction at the nozzle. As soon as you move away from the nozzle, you don't have any airspeed, so it can't suck. So they're great for plugging into things, power tools, bandsaws, any cabineted machine. But as soon as we're doing this, it's an airflow we need. So I always go with bag types, impellers, or cyclones. That's great.
Nathan's asked, do you need a sealer before a wax?
In normal circumstances, yes. What I've done with this is gone over it so many times, put wet solution on, and then resanded. So the nap's risen up, I've resanded it back. I put another wet solution on, I've resanded it back. I've sanded the bits out of this. So the wax can go on top. There's no more nap to rise up. So I've got away with it. The only thing it doesn't do is doesn't shine as freely. So I said earlier that we're going to put some Carn oil wax on to counteract that. But on the inside, yeah, you should really put a sealer on. Absolutely, you get a much better finish. Yes, right.
And Mike's asked, when cutting your logs, what do you end seal, please? What do you use for your end sealing?
So there's lots of different things. If you're cutting lumber, so just leaving lumber or planks, that sort of stuff, it doesn't have to look pretty. So old tins of paint will work well. PVA, so builder's PVA is a lot cheaper than buying glue. So if you go to a builder's merchant and get the tubs of PVA that you add to cement, so like plasticizer, then that's brilliant. You can buy end seal as a latex solution to go on the end if you're only doing small quantities. If you're doing a lot, then it's quite a pricey way of doing it. Wax is another one. You can use wax. But any of those things, really, what we're trying to do is seal that end grain. So any solution that will seal it is perfect. Yes, great.
Question from Jenny. She's got some microcrystalline wax, and in the recent really hot weather, it melted in the tin.
Yeah.
It's solidified again now. It's a bit cooler. Is it still okay to use?
Absolutely fine. No problem at all. Doesn't matter. It can melt. In fact, I prefer it when it's a little bit softer. It goes on nicely. You know, it's like in the winter, in our cold months, it's really difficult to start, to get wax out of the tin. So this time of year is great.
What's the material on your board there?
The material is router matting. Okay, and then I buy this in rolls. We sell it as a tube of router matting, and I'll use it on this. I'll use it in small sections for small turnings. It's as for a turner, have a roll of router matting handy. You will use it all the time. If for nothing else, putting it on the bench when you're signing your work, that sort of stuff. Or when you're doing any decorating on a workbench, have that down there because it's soft. It doesn't let things slip, and it protects the timber from being damaged. I think we're looking for part number. Yeah, they're going to find your part numbers for that and put a link up for it. There we are. So, right, small bowl gouge. A little bit of a hollow. We don't want this to rock on the table. Let's just have a check. Yeah, there's a hollow in there. So we're going to do just a tiny bit of sanding, and then we're going to use the power sanding pads to finish that one off. So let's go for, I think I'll start at a 150 and then 240, 400. No, I'm not. I'm going to start at a 240. 240, 400. Grit. Obviously, be a little bit careful here. You don't want to slip onto your nicely finished outside surface. Yeah, happy with that. So then all we're going to do now is bring that out the way. Take that off. So what we're left with at the moment is just that base with that little pimple on that we've got to remove. All right, so that's the next job. Yes, Craig.
Got a couple of questions. Any reason you use ply for your backing board there instead of MDF? Is MDF all right?
MDF would be okay in this instance for doing something like this, but if you're going to use MDF, make sure it's thick, so a good inch thick, and don't go too big with it. I don't use MDF for things like wood plates. So, jaws. There we are. So my wood plate jaws, those sorts of things there. Because it delaminates too easily. So that's always going to be plywood. But for this, yeah, no, you'll get away with it with this if you use a thick piece because you're only pushing against it. You're not doing anything else. All right. Yes, Craig.
Why is it called router matting?
Because it's a non-slip matting for putting your work on when you're routing. It helps to stop the pieces slide across the bench. Right, but obviously, we can use it for anything. Okay, so let's go with a small rotary sander. I'm going to use this one purely because it fits in my chuck nicely. If you notice, I haven't taken the chuck off the lathe through this, the making of this bowl. It's been used for every process. We're going to start with a coarse disc so we can get the job done nice and quickly. So coarse disc, I'm talking 100 grit. And then we can rapidly go up through the grits. I'm going to turn extraction on just to protect myself and Craig. So 2-inch disc there, 50mm disc, just because it's nice and small, it's out my way. Just make sure you've got clear vision so you can see. You don't want to be accidentally taking off half the other side of your bowl. There we are. So I'm almost there. I'm going to stop at that point, go to a finer disc, and let's go all the way down to a 240. And then a 400. Put them on standby. So 240 grit. Right then, everybody, look at the back first. You see what I mean about the contrast between that white base and that lovely blue. So when you put your name on there, you've done your signature, you put the name of the timber on there, then you can oil or wax over the top. That's when you get that lovely contrast. And then turning over, you've got that lovely timber. There we are. Any questions before we sign off?
We've got one question. What do you use to stick the router matting to your board?
Contact adhesive. That can be either spray mount, but I tend to go with the Evo stick, the really gummy contact adhesive. Layer it on, wait a few seconds for it to start drying, and then pop it back on. All right. Yes. There we are then. All right. All questions done?
One more question.
One more question.
How do you name your wood? What do you use? How do you mark?
So a little Firewriter pyrography pen, a very fine nib. With and I'm gonna be absolutely 100% honest with you. My wife does all of my writing for me because my handwriting is appalling, and she can put very fine writing on, and she's got lovely writing and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's a Firewriter, a needlepoint tip, so it's tiny writing. All right. There we are, guys. I hope you enjoyed that because I really did enjoy it. I love colouring. I love this sort of timber as well. And it's nice knowing its journey from tree to now finished piece. So join us next week. Don't forget, it's a question and answer session for me on Tuesday, which is going to be all about spindle turning, skew chisels, making lace bobbins, those sorts of things. So come up with questions, email questions in to give me a few to start me off. And then on the day, just bombard us with questions. So have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Thank you for stopping by and watching and supporting us. Don't forget, if you enjoy what we do, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share with as many people as you like. So until next week, bye-bye.